So I hope you all had a wonderful break and you made wonderful contacts with all the people that you meet during the coffee breaks in international conferences. Sorry about that, but next year it will be better. Anyway, we come to the second part of our conference, and it's called PAGODE tools. So we will have 3 presentations about the things that happened during this project and also the results they created and why this was according again to me, but I'm not alone in this, a rather great successful project. We start first with what is called the semantic background. So Maja and Nataša, I will ask all the speakers from this session to shortly present themselves. I will only address them with their first name so that I won't make mistakes in the pronunciation of their family names. So first of all, we have Maja and Nataša from the University of Ljubljana who will talk about the semantic backgrounds. Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Erik. So my name is Maja Veselič, and I will be actually presenting alone today because Nataša is only here with us in spirit and possibly listening in. Unfortunately, due to the illness, she couldn't be a full participant in the conference. But I would like to add that although this is, it will be me presenting, this is the work I will show was done in very close collaboration with my 2 colleagues at the University of Ljubljana, Nataša, Vampelj, Suhadolnik, and Dunja Zorman. So our 3-person team at the Department of Asian Studies was tasked or was brought to this project with the task of creating a definition of what constitutes Chinese cultural heritage in Europe. The heritage that was either to be added to Europeana or already in Europeana and semantically enriched through the various tools of the PAGODE project that other team members, that is from other partner institutions, will speak about later in this session. On the surface, this question of what counts as Chinese cultural heritage seemed to be fairly straightforward. And the answer seemed to be straightforward too. That is, things Chinese that are found in European institutions, or even more broadly, things Chinese that found their way into Europe. But what does it mean, things Chinese? Are these the objects that were made in China by Chinese for Chinese? And how should we draw the boundaries of China, or even Europe for that matter? Not only have the political borders of the respective entities changed historically, but as the world was brought closer in the modern period, the people traveled more intensely, settled in different places in greater numbers, and goods as well as ideas circulated with the ever greater speed. Okay, so in the field of heritage studies, and I'm sorry if I'm going a little bit academic here, but you know, after all, we were brought to this project due to our background. In the field of heritage studies, it is now an accepted fact that heritage making, that is making something into heritage, is an inherently political process. And I mean politically here in the broadest sense of the word. So by bestowing something the status of heritage, we give it importance, visibility, and we promise a preservation. However, heritage is always understood as being someone's, as belonging to someone, that is to a certain group of people. Even the concept of world heritage as it operates today in its present iteration is inseparably linked from nation states, linked to the nation states. So in other words, in the process of assigning a particular thing, whether that thing is tangible or intangible, an aura of heritage, some things and some people by extension are included, while others intentionally not are excluded. And on the basis of this understanding, we decided at the very beginning that we should try to attempt to achieve 2 things with our definition. That is, that it should be theoretically or thematically broad. So it should be as open as possible, but in the case of potentially contested descriptions, we should err on the side of caution. And secondly, that this definition should actually work for the project. So it should make sense within the project here. What I'm trying to do here is sort of give a disclaimer that this is not, we are not saying that our definition is definitive or even exhaustive or anything of the sort, but that it is something that has worked very well for our project. So how we went about it? I mean, in line with the goals of our project, and in close collaboration with other partners or potential partners, we first took stock of what is already in Europeana and has labels, is labeled as Chinese either in the description part or in the metadata in the tags. And secondly, what kind of materials do various cultural heritage institutions that were partners or potential partners have in their own collections? So, well, nobody wondered whether the exquisite porcelain pieces in Benaki Museum that we see here on the left, or the photographs of equally exquisite religious statues that are kept in KIK-IRPA archives fell under the category of Chinese heritage in Europe. We were also faced with more difficult questions, such as, do books only count as Chinese if they are written in Chinese, or is perhaps the main criterion that their authors identify themselves as Chinese, and how would we know that for people long gone? Or, for example, what about the many pictorial and later photo albums showing the so-called typical scenes of Chinese life that were so popular among the foreign visitors? Or even still the export art made in China to the tastes of Western elites, which was the things that were supposedly Chinese, but would be unrecognizable as such to the Chinese eye. Maybe more difficult even still, what about the gowns that were made from Chinese silks, but were tailored in Europe, in European fashions? Do they count Chinese enough to be included in our project? So we explain this in some greater detail in the document that's published on PAGODE website under the tab Good Practices. But we eventually settled, at least when it comes to objects, on differentiation between Chinese and China-related heritage, and we decided both are to be included in the project. So the Chinese heritage or the Chinese objects would be the objects in China from Chinese materials with Chinese technology, which are at least partly based on Chinese designs or aesthetic principles. And Chinese-related objects would be those, let's say, products or semi-products that are then processed elsewhere. But of course, we limited this China-related category in terms of objects in production to pre-1978, when the PRC opened up, and then a large part of global industrial production moved there. Of course, this China-related category was also quite useful when we were thinking later in the influence China, Chinese fashion, Chinese aesthetic, and so on, Chinese conceptions of body had on practices in Europe. Now, looking at, looking at objects in our partner collections, for example, the rich photographic material in the Finnish Missionary Archives and the United Archives, it became clear to us that we must really take a broad approach. We found a very inspiring and also very useful, very operationalizable or easy to operate with, very workable solution in the concept of flows. This is a very popular concept in anthropology and also some other humanities. So rather than treating China and Europe as two clearly delineated spaces, separate entities, we focused on the contacts and exchanges between the two. And looking at what traveled, we devised a three-partite yet intersecting scheme of flows, namely flows of objects, flows of people, and flows of ideas, practices, and knowledge. Of course, an object may travel over a trade route and come to Europe, but it may also be brought back by those who visited China or by Chinese who came to Europe for travel, or even who migrated permanently. Then again, you see, I'm just trying to show a little bit these interconnections. I mean, it's quite obvious, but still, it is people who often bring new ideas, but often it's the objects too who convey them. So this scheme really, this sort of framework really allowed us to create a sort of a checklist. And this is just to give you an example. I know it's a lot of text for one slide. So we created a sort of a checklist, which is obviously far from exhaustive, that could help content providers identify items to be included in the PAGODE project. It also enabled us to begin devising the semantic web for descriptive metadata, which was also part of our task. And which would, once the objects were digitized, link these objects with the rich information available in other controlled vocabularies and thesauri. Now, to put it simply, we created a keyword list through which the objects could be related or paired with the much more detailed and hierarchically structured information in open databases. And this is what one small segment of our keyword list looks like. Now, our colleagues in the following two talks will present the way this keyword, or at least part of their talks will be on the way these keywords were applied, namely in the crowdsourced annotation and in the automatic enrichment. But here I would just like to, to briefly outline our work process. So based on the types of objects, maybe I go back one slide anyway, we created sort of subcategories. So you can see here we have historical periods, but there were textiles, ceramics, photography, and this was based on the predominance of particular types of objects in the collections that were to be included. This allowed us to create a very simple two-tier structure. So we did not do the whole tree structure or more complex tree structure for our keyword list. And we based our keywords partly on the existing thesaurian vocabularies, or we had a lot of help from those. But although some of them are really good, none were specialized enough, or some were too specialized, actually, too specialist for the purposes of our project. So the keywords were based on our expertise and the provided content, but also we were fortunate enough to be able to rely on photo vocabulary, which is a controlled vocabulary created by our partner Photoconsortium in a different project. We tried to mix some general keywords and the specific ones, and some of the challenges that we were facing were due to the different levels of expertise our content providing partners had, also due to different transcription systems for Chinese language in different European languages. I would also like to use this opportunity to thank two doctoral students at our department, Taes and Mina, for helping in creating this keyword list based on their own fields of speciality. Now, these keywords were then linked, as you could see already in the previous slide, to Getty's Art and Archaeology Thesaurus and to the Wikidata. When no entry existed in either of the two, we did some of our initial keywords out. So we thought, okay, obviously they're not that useful. And but there were a number of those which we deemed were quite crucial. So we created new entries in Wikidata for those, and in fact we created 83 new entries for this project specifically. Now here there is a very brief comparison between the two types of thesauri or vocabularies. AAT obviously was developed by professionals, has a very professional and reliable terminology. It's also very good because it takes into account, as I've mentioned already before, the different transliteration or transcription systems for Chinese language in European languages. Despite its professional orientation, it still lacks some terminology for China-specific or China-related material, even terminology that might be deemed quite general for sinologists. For example, in periodization, it doesn't separate between warring states periods and spring and autumn periods of Zhou dynasty. It also doesn't have any specific architectural terms for China, for Chinese architecture, and so on. When it comes to Wikidata, which is obviously used and created by experts and non-experts, the quality of range is wide. So sometimes the additional revisions to the entries are needed. But it's really great that we were able to use Wikidata to create our own entries that were useful for us, and we were able, within obviously the Wikidata, to link them through statements to yet other data, and therefore we were able to create a much richer semantic network for our keyword list. Now, as new materials were accepted for inclusion in PAGODE, because of course we've met in the beginning, we had took stock of what was possibly available as we devised our own definition. Partners came up with further suggestions of the material that could be included. Other partners joined at later stages, and so on. So as new materials were accepted for inclusion in PAGODE, we adjusted our keyword list. And we did so also on the basis of these two applications of the keyword list that will be presented later. So to give you some examples how we refined it, when in the crowdsourcing annotation campaign, we saw that there were a number of pictures of Europeans in China. We added vocabulary related to that, or also coins were added, coin collections were added, and we added vocabulary related particularly to coins. So really, we further refined this list based on how well it did its job in the automatic enrichment and in the crowdsourcing campaign. What became clear was that we could have used more general terms, especially because most of our content providing partners did not have China experts in their employ. And the metadata that was attached to the objects in their existing inventories or databases was quite elementary. Now, I hope it has become clear, creating the semantic background was not simply a stage in the project. Although the really heavy work was done in the beginning, in the initial months, so that is with formulating the definition, creating the keyword list, and weaving it into the semantic web. This was a process that continued almost to the very end of this project. And if I had better drawing skills, I would draw a little snail out of this scheme here. Now, to finish my presentation with a few more general observations on our involvement in the PAGODE project. When we joined PAGODE with Ljubljana team, we were not fully aware of what our work would actually entail. I must say that we were quite naive. Although all three of us have had some experience with projects that involve Chinese heritage and that database creation, we have not worked with such a diverse team of experts and with such ambitious project goals. So for us, perhaps the first challenge was already to get used to the jargon. Although it could be called controlled vocabulary, you could perhaps notice that we still prefer to refer to our key list with this by this modest name. Another great surprise for us was to find that most of our partnering institutions not only did not have trained China specialists, but were often too understaffed to create anything beyond the most basic metadata. And I think this topic came up a little bit in one of our PAGODE festival events. If there is one big lesson that we learned, and I mean really truly with all our beings learned it in this project, however, is that metadata that is rich, diverse, and linked open metadata is gold. And I'm sure that Valentina and Sofie in the next talk will find a more eloquent way to put this. As we are a part of a team that is creating a database of Chinese collections in Slovenia, the knowledge and the skills we learned through involvement in these projects are invaluable. It was also a fantastic experience to see how our work could be used by our technical specialists and how their results could inform and improve what we do in terms of semantic structure, and even more so in terms of how this is all connected to the possibilities of user engagement with digitized and digitalized heritage. And I believe this is the topic that will be further explored in the next presentation. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you. I think you can hear me. Huh? Thank you very much, Maja, and also thank you, of course, to all your colleagues of your, I don't know how to call it, Chinese department of the University of Ljubljana or something like that. For me, it was also, of course, very special to learn all these things about Chinese cultural heritage. As you maybe remember from the beginning of the presentation of my director, our institute is mostly working on the Belgian cultural heritage. So it's Chinese is not our specialty, but of course, since we have also photographs of objects in all kinds of museums, we also have this to contribute. But we, as you said, we lacked the skills and the expertise of really well describing it. So during this project, we learned about it and we will use it in our own institution. But we will go on further with that after the three presentations. I think I would like now to present the second speaker or the second speakers, because if in the world we live now, where institutions like ours and others don't have always millions of collaborators in the institution itself to make our content more rich, there exists since many years something what's called crowdsourcing. And I think Spyros, Sofie and Valentina can now explain how this crowdsourcing annotation was used in the context of the PAGODE project. So I give the floor to you.
Thank you, Erik. Can you give me a sign whether or not you see our presentation? Yes, alrighty. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sofie, representing Photoconsortium today as a digital curator, and I'm very happily joined by Spyros Bekiaris from ThinkCode, which is a startup company specialized in intelligent solutions and software using artificial intelligence. And as you might grasp from that introduction, Spyros and I are not exactly two peas in one pod, so we come from very different perspectives into this one specific task within PAGODE. But we worked on this intensely together, and both of our skill sets somehow came into play. And as we run through our presentation of the work carried out and the results that we achieved, you will see who did what and why we made a team together. This talk is about metadata and more, crowdsourcing annotations for PAGODE content. And perhaps question one would be, why do metadata matter so much that we connected a specific project task to this? Well, I think Maja, who is definitely more eloquent than she gives herself credit for, she put it perfectly when she said that rich, descriptive and open or linked metadata are simply gold, and they are gold from different perspectives and for different user groups. And thinking of the case Europeana in particular, which is always what we had in mind as a guiding light throughout all our project efforts, then we're thinking all types of users, whether they are this general audience with an interest in culture, whether it's researchers wanting to use the Europeana records, perhaps it's educators wanting to use cultural heritage in their teachings, or perhaps curators such as myself looking for material to furnish an exhibition. What we all need is a good leeway to discover valuable collections and specific objects tuned to our wishes. So this means that supporting findability, enabling usability or reusability, and in the end storytelling is just key when it comes to improving user engagement and maximizing the relevance of the work we do in the Europeana ecosphere. This is why we need metadata that are rich, descriptive, linked, multilingual, correct, structured, authoritative, you name it. The more qualitative your metadata, the further you are on a track to a successful use of Europeana and reuse of its content. So we thought, let's go to the source, to the metadata, and let's implement a hybrid approach. You will hear more about the automatic enrichments in the next talk. What we're talking about is quite a more manual process involving that elusive crowd. So what we're doing is we're playing it by numbers, reaching out to anybody interested in lending us a hand, giving people authority, responsibility, and involvement in the project, but also in the stakes of cultural heritage in general. We did this using the Crowd Heritage platform because what we promised in our grant agreement was to adding annotations in the form of tags, and you will see in a minute in what shape these tags can be added, to 2,000 legacy records, so 2,000 records already in Europeana, were supposed to be enriched, become more talkative through added labels using the Crowd Heritage platform, an existing application that Spyros will now introduce. Hoping that Spyros is unmuted, Erik? And that he is here, of course. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Sofie. So, okay, let's talk a bit about Crowd Heritage. As Sofie mentioned, Crowd Heritage is a crowdsourcing platform that allows its registered users to contribute to several of its crowdsourcing campaigns by adding descriptive keywords to selected digital objects. So in this way, the crowd can assist in the enrichment of selected contents metadata. The platform introduces some gamification elements in order to make the whole experience more appealing to our users. By making use of a point reward system as well as campaign leaderboards, each user is engaged in this challenge by contributing more, earning more points, climbing up the campaign's leaderboard, and earn badges for their progress and the effort they have put into this. Crowd Heritage is a user-friendly platform. It's easy to use for everyone. And the user's duties simply come down to two simple tasks. First, add tags, which tags can be added by selecting one or more terms from controlled vocabularies, such as AAT, fashion, photography, etc. And of course, by upvoting or downvoting existing tags added by other users to the campaign. Okay, yes, and this is an example of an item page in Crowd Heritage. On the left, we can see the item, the object, the digital object. And on the right, we can see the list of terms added by our users for the specific object. A user, in order to add a new annotation, a new tag in this picture, they simply need to type in the keyword they wish to annotate the picture with, and a list of terms retrieved by this thesaurus appears to the user, and all that's left is for the user to select the term they find more appropriate. And by doing so, this new term appears in the list. And like we said before, the user is also able to go through the list of the annotations and maybe give their feedback regarding the rest of the annotations by upvoting or downvoting these existing annotations.
So as I said, with this tool, we intended to enrich 2000 existing Europeana records. And what we fathomed in the beginning of the project is to deploy 2 annotation campaigns. Just to make it a bit more fun for everyone, we wanted to use 2 different themes. So there are 2 different narratives, so to speak, 2 different scopes that you could use in terms of material. We wanted to shed light on the one hand on photography, on the other hand on artifacts, because we noticed that in our partners' new collections, these were 2 distinct categories present in the material. And of course, we wanted to focus on the existing content, which is what we initially promised, but we also thought that the opportunity would be too good to just let it go and not include any of the new content. So this means that we also had to phase the campaign slightly in time, so as to give our partners the necessary scope of time to actually publish their collections in Europeana. So what we did first is we went into Europeana, made an analysis of China records already existing in the first place from Photoconsortium partners, because with our network, we already represented quite a good amount of records that in the end led up to a nice small batch of pictures to use in the very first campaign. What we did then together with Spyros was compile this very first campaign collection with about 700 items in width, and width is another application developed by Spyros and his colleagues, allowing for making your very own heritage collections and exhibitions. So we imported the items here as a collection, and then we published them to Crowd Heritage under the title Scenes and People from China. Voila, this happens when you click the collection. It unfolds into all kinds of pictures, items, records from Europeana, and each and every one of them, you can view them and label them or up-downvote the text as Spyros just demonstrated. This was campaign number 1, Scenes and People from China, with content from Photoconsortium partners, where we allowed for layered descriptions. So descriptions that could be added either by specialists, either by just a general audience. And this really was enabled by the type of images that we found in the Photoconsortium content. We launched this campaign in autumn 2020. Every campaign goes with some targets that you set for yourself, and we fully achieved those targets a few months later, so very happy with the results of that first one. Here you can see that at a certain point we bumped it up by including 4 more collections in this first campaign, because there was a bonus opportunity. A group of KU Leuven students chose actually the PAGODE annotation campaign as its cultural policy project for 2020-2021. So what they were supposed to do was to create their own campaign activity to get people enthused to contribute to the annotations, and to gather a lot more tags within their community. So this is what we did in spring 2021. We thought it would be fun for them to not only work on that first set of pictures, but to have some more materials. And here we already were able to include some of the new partner content. So Museo Virasto just had its first set published, and we were able to include it in this second deployment of the Scenes and People from China. We also took the occasion to enrich the Tzouvaras. So again, the Ljubljana team stepped in and helped us to make the elements of interpretation, the concepts, even more applicable to the specific content chosen. And when we closed the campaign at the end of May, you can see we were highly successful with over 50 contributors and more than 100% success rate. Second campaign was specifically destined for the students at Ljubljana University, the sinology experts that were definitely able to contribute their knowledge about much more specific items, bronzes, amulets, sometimes numismatic artifacts that would be really difficult to describe for non-sinology experts. We wanted to catch them just before the end of the academic year, so we launched the campaign at the end of May. We left it out there for a bit over a month, I think. We also included some very specific keywords to help making the annotations as meaningful as possible. And when we closed it at the end of July, you can see that perhaps we did not reach that admittedly very ambitious target, but I was specifically impressed with the number of contributors, seeing that this campaign was only open for a month and a half, of which most of the time was exam period, and all of the content was so specific and specialist. I'm really impressed that 34 different people added almost 7,000 tags to collections such as these. Finally, another bonus was that a few of the students were so dynamic and so involved and so engaged with the PAGODE annotation campaign that we came to envisage a summer sprint with a few among them, where they would try to hit very specific goals, each on their own collection. So each would have the responsibility to add a certain number of tags and upvotes and downvotes to some especially curated collections for this summer effort over the month of July. I think Spyros and I were really thinking that we were aiming high by setting a goal of 24,000 tags or 24,000 contributions, but you can see that we far surpassed it by almost going up to 70,000 interventions. Here you can see 6 of the 9 collections that we created, and these mostly consisted of new content. And I'm very happy that in this way, the partners and the associate partners that put so much effort in digitizing, metadating, publishing their collections were kind of extra rewarded by gaining all these enrichments, all these new tags that indeed, as Maja indicated, sometimes they weren't able to add themselves by lack of time or lack of capacity. Well, in this way, we've been able to add, you know, thousands and tens of thousands of new descriptive metadata. Spyros, I hand over back to you, because adding annotations, of course, is not the end of the loop.
So, after all this amazing work made by our users, a final step needs to happen in order for all these valuable contributions to be sent back to Ljubljana and be utilized. This step is the campaign validation, and it's performed by the campaign's curator or curators, to whom it has been granted moderator level of access to the specific campaign. So for this process, the curator needs to have a complete overview of the produced annotations and validate their quality accordingly. for the needs of the PAGODE project. And in order to validate easily every single annotations the users generated, we reworked the platform interface and adjusted a bit the validation workflow. And this workflow includes these steps. First of all, the campaign curator, the moderator, needs to visit the validation page and start by setting a threshold, a score threshold for the annotations produced in order to initialize all of the campaign's annotation state as accepted to be published or not. Then the curators can go through the campaign's collections of items and simply view the annotations and adjust their initial published state set in the previous step if they disagree with the one set it automatically. And when the reviewing step is done, the curators, by going back to the validation page, they can visualize the campaign statistics and results. And if they're happy with them, they can, of course, proceed with exporting these annotations they accepted to be published during the previous step, just by clicking on the relevant button inside the page. And yeah, here we have an example of the button that leads to the validation page that is located in the campaigns page and is visible only by the users with moderator access. And by clicking it, we go to the validation page. And here we have some options for the moderator. Like we said, the validation starts by clicking the Publish Criteria button, which pops this small window that allows for the moderator to set the threshold. And by clicking Submit, initialize the published state of all the produced annotations. And of course, they can export the list of the contributors to the campaign. And in the end, when everything is in place, export the actual annotations file and share it. And next slide, please. Yes. So when the validation step is done, all that is left is to deliver these produced annotations back to Ljubljana, like we said. For the PAGODE, we use these vocabularies that are listed here. The first one is the photo vocabulary. And of course, we had the controlled PAGODE vocabulary, a list of Wikidata and AA terms, which was made by Ljubljana University. However, during the annotations delivered to Ljubljana, some issues emerged regarding the photo vocabulary terms, which prevented them to be dereferenced and so displayed in Ljubljana. So some actions need to happen in order for our produced annotations to be viable and so that Ljubljana can make use of them. So what we did, first of all, we compiled a list of the most common terms that were used as annotations in the 3 campaigns. Then Sofie and Valentina manually matched these photo vocabulary terms to their equivalent Wikidata terms. And afterwards, we transformed this, the CSV file that was exported from Crowd Heritage and converted all these photo vocabulary terms to the equivalent Wikidata terms. And then we were done. All we had to do was deliver the files to Ljubljana and they could ingest the generated annotations. And here we have the campaign results for the 3 campaigns around for PAGODE. First, for the Scenes and People from China, we can see the contributions. We can see that for the 1,900 items, about 96% of them were annotated. And after the validations, 90% of the produced annotations were accepted to be published. And we can see a timeline of the contributions by the users, as well as the number of items annotated with a specific number of annotations. And secondly, for the second campaign, the Chinese artifacts one, was also a successful one because almost 98% of the items were annotated by our users. And during the validations, 96% of these annotations were accepted for publish. And finally, for the last campaign, the Summer Annotation Sprint, it was a great and really successful one. 100% of the items were actually annotated, and about 97% of the produced annotations were accepted to be published, and the results were really amazing. And so this is it from us regarding the crowdsourcing part of the project and the annotations gathered for the PAGODE content. I would really like to thank everyone involved in this effort for a great collaboration, without which these outstanding results presented to you wouldn't have happened otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much, Sofie and Spyros. Don't forget, people, that you can put your questions in the chat, and please also add, of course, to which person you or to which group or to which team you ask these questions, and then we'll try to organize all this after the third presentation. As you know, so we just heard lots of interesting things about crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing is, for me, something that's similar to what's called a group intelligence. Now, apart from the group intelligence, we also have artificial intelligence that can be used to help our project make a success. And so the next speakers are Mina and Vassilis from PostScriptum, who will explain how they used automatic enrichment and how they used artificial intelligence in automatic enrichments for the content that the content providers provided to Ljubljana. The floor is yours, please.
So can you hear me? Okay, I will try to. Okay, so good morning, everyone. I would, as you all know, this session is dedicated to the PAGODE tools, and specifically this presentation is dedicated to the automatic enrichment. Just give me 2 seconds. Yeah. So I represent PostScriptum, and together with my colleague Vassilis Tzouvaras, will be giving this presentation about the automatic enrichment. And it's also a way to answer, it's one of the answers of Sofie's question, why metadata matter. So automatic enrichment was implemented in activity 4 titled Content Quality Improvement of Existing Collections to Ljubljana. One of the expected outcomes of this activity was to enrich material that is already published in Ljubljana by using automatic tools for enrichment. Automated enrichment using artificial intelligence and natural language processing on records already published in Ljubljana was one of the 3 implementation scenarios for metadata curation and enrichment, as already mentioned Sofie earlier. The first scenario is that of the metadata creation realized by content providers at the time of generation of the digitization activities that took place within activity 3. The second scenario is that of the metadata enriched by crowdsourcing annotation, as already presented in the previous session. And a combination of artificial intelligence and natural language processing technologies is the basis of the third scenario. These 2 technologies allow to recognize automatically the information that is embedded in the content and in the metadata, and to add relevant terms and links to authority files in the existing metadata. This process has the advantage of enabling bulk enrichment of large datasets, which would require a huge effort and extended timescale if done manually. In the scope of PAGODE, automated enrichment was performed by use of algorithms trained with a list of keywords developed within the framework of the semantic background, as described already from Maja and the Ljubljana team. This keyword list was run on terms on metadata from a selected set from Ljubljana collections. The algorithm recognized the terms and enriched the metadata with the links to the respective entries in Wikidata and KIK-IRPA, and the enrichments are made available to Ljubljana via the Annotation API for display in the respective records. In this table, you can have an overview of the providers and selected datasets with a number of Chinese heritage-related records that were provided for automatic enrichment. The selection process took place with an activity 2 from the curatorial team, and of course in a constant dialogue with the Ljubljana team, who at the same time developed the semantic background and the list of keywords. So you'll see providers such as Ljubljana Fashion, English metadata from providers to Ljubljana, the Welcome Collection, the Deutsche Digital Bibliothek, and the collection photography from the Museum of Eastern Antiquities in Stockholm. A total number of 25,590 records were selected to be enriched. The contractual target actually was the enrichment of 20,000 records, as indicated in the grant agreement. And in total, 22,410 records were confirmed to be provided to Ljubljana and published in the portal, a result that exceeds almost 11% of the initial target. So now I will give the floor to my colleague Vassilis Tzouvaras, senior researcher at NTUA in artificial intelligence and learning systems, and technical consultant of PostScriptum, who will provide us a detailed description of the whole process of enrichment and the tools used for this procedure, and also the validation process that took place after the end of the automatic enrichment. Vassilis, the floor is yours.
Hello, hi everybody. So yes, thank you, Mina. I will talk about the SAGE tool, which is an automatic semantic enrichment of EDM records, as we call it. This is a tool that is being developed by the National Technical University of Athens, and is being used in the framework of PAGODE to extract the enrichments, the 20,000, which is finally it's 22,000 enrichment. Next slide, please. Mina, can you? You don't control it. Do I control it? No, I don't.
Can you hear me? I don't know why it's stuck on this. It's frozen. Okay.
Okay, so I will say a few things about the platform, some technical details, and then I will show you some examples how these extraction tools are working. So let's first go in the general view of the tool. So like I said, it is a semantic enrichment and data management platform. So it's not just a tool that extracts enrichment, it's also a platform that stores these enrichments and has an API in order to import enrichments from Ljubljana and also to give back the enrichments through Ljubljana's API to Ljubljana. So it can import heterogeneous data, so it can handle different data formats like XML, CSV, JSON, RDF, and others. And using a technology that is being built in-house at NTUA called D2RML, which transforms various formats to RDF. So we are transforming everything to a common format, to an RDF common format. And then we are storing this information in our platform using a triple store. In order to extract the entities, we are using external tools, so in tools that they are plugged into this platform. One of these external tools is being built in-house at NTUA, and we're also using a tool that is being built from someone else. And then we are applying these services. We are extracting the enrichments using a human-in-the-loop approach. We are validating, since these enrichments are extracted using automatic tools, they are not always correct. So we want a phase where users are validating this process, where we are calling it human in the loop. And finally, the enriched and clean data sets, we are giving them back to Ljubljana. Next slide, please. The technologies that we are using, like I said, we are using RDF, the Resource Description Framework language from W3C, in order to represent the knowledge. So we are transforming everything to RDF. As a triple store, we are using Virtuoso. And then we're using Sparkle to query this knowledge that is being stored in Virtuoso. And for the non-RDF data, we're using MongoDB. Next slide, please. And then we are having, we're using three annotators, the Sparkle annotator, the Nerd annotator, and the Thesaurus annotator. And in order to process the data and transform it the way we want to process it, we're using some regular expression tools. So I will go through now some examples for each annotator in order to understand how each one of those is using. From the titles, you can more or less understand how these annotators are working. So for the Sparkle annotator, we give an example for the creator, for example. So we have a name in the creator, where in brackets, so it has some additional information. As I said, we are using regular expressions to either isolate the information that we want, delete the non-useful information, and we end up with exactly the information that we want. In our example, in this example, we wanted to isolate the Angelo Badalamenti, and then using the Sparkle language, the Sparkle annotator, we are querying Wikidata. We find the knowledge that we want in Wikidata, and then we are extracting the URI from Wikidata, and we insert it in our metadata. And also we are inserting additional metadata that can be found in Wikidata and can be used to enrich the item. The same way, more or less, works with the Nerd annotator. In the next slide, please. The difference is now that we have a long description. So we're using with the descriptions, with the description element. So we have a long description. We're using the Nerd annotator, which stands for named entity recognition and disambiguation. So which means that first we extract the named entities that we want. On the box on the bottom of the image, you can see the entities that have been extracted: the Nighthawk, Edward Hopper, School of Art and Institute of Chicago. And the disambiguation part is that, again, we link to Wikidata. We find these items in Wikidata. We use the URIs in order to enrich the item that is under processing. And also we find additional information apart from the Wikidata ID, like additional information that we want, and we store it also with our data. In the next slide, we can see the last annotator, the Source Annotator. The difference from the two previous annotators is that we are not working with Wikidata, but we are working with thesauri that has been indicated by our providers. So depending on the content that we are processing, we are using a different annotator, thesaurus, either Getty thesaurus or thesaurus that is being built, have been built in-house by the content providers. And then we see an example here that first we extract the entities that we want to enrich, and then using a string matching algorithm, we find these items in those thesauri. And then we are enriching our metadata with the URI and additional information that has been found in those thesauri. So to summarize, in the next slide, please, we have three main annotators. The nerd annotator that detects and disambiguates the named entities that such as person, places, and organizations. The thesaurus annotator that it's a smart string matching using the lemmatizers and fuzziness to link the text to a custom vocabulary. The main difference from the nerd annotator is that we are using specific vocabularies that have been predefined for the project and created for the project. And the Sparkle annotator that it uses the Sparkle language to query external data sources. All those keywords were translated to various languages, of course, through the respective Wikidata and Getty links in order to create a multilingual vocabulary to fit the needs of the projects. So this is the summary of the technical work that has happened in the Sage tools. Here we can see some examples, specific examples from the project, because the previous examples are some general examples that I'm using in our presentations. Here we can see some specific examples, descriptions from items that we have processed within the project. And then we saw on the left part are the descriptions and colored with red are the entities that have been extracted using the algorithms. And then on the right part of the screen, you can see the links, the matches that we have found for those items in Wikidata. So, okay, you can see the examples with traveling, with travel, China, and so on. Additional examples here with other descriptions and how and where we match them in Wikidata. And next slide, please. I said that since those are results coming from automatic algorithms, so we have to go through a process of validation. And this is very important because we have to provide to Ljubljana only correct enrichments. And so in order to do so, we have been through a manual validation process. And here we can see some examples of this process. And in that was the last step of this process. And in the next slide, please. We see how this can also be a useful feedback from validators and other experts. So we use the experts of these projects in order to validate the results. So the feedback was used to fine-tune the results. And unfortunately, the second round of enrichment was not possible due to time limitations. So it was planned also a second phase of enrichment, which didn't happen, but finally it wasn't necessary. These results also from the validations, we are using them to retrain our networks of these net algorithms that we are using. So we are not only using them in order to validate and get only the correct results, but also we are using this as a training data set to retrain our algorithms. And next slide, please. So the Sage for PAGODE in numbers is that we have more than 94,000 accepted enrichments and 22,000 enrichment validators. And the validation progress worked 100%. And this is my presentation. So I try to give all the details, technical and non-technical. If there are any questions, I think that there has been a question in the chat. I was wondering.
Yes, there is actually a question in chat for Vassilis, I suppose.
Yes, I don't.
I think that we are you sure that the presentation is completely finished for the third speakers? Mina, you don't have to say anything anymore. So yeah, I know it's a bit complicated, but I try, because since we had three presentations and we had questions coming for all three, I'll try to keep it a bit structured. People that know me will probably start to laugh now. In a way that we'll come back to you, Vassilis, because I try to be it chronologically. So for the first presentation, there was a remark in the chat about the AAT Tzouvaras by my colleague Eva Koutijzer. So since Maja, you mentioned also that when using the AAT, you seem to find certain parts lacking, specifically around the Chinese cultural heritage. And since we created here in this project a set of terms which are very good, I think it will be a good idea, and I can help you with that, Erik can help you with that, that we, from the project, contact the Getty people to try to put these terms also into the AAT. So
yes, this is certainly a very good suggestion. I mean, as we are very new to dealing with linked open data and different thesauri, and I mean the organizations that are behind this thesauri, we will welcome your help. We've talked, I think, in the project several times already about the fact how we want to create something that's more lasting, something not just in terms of our content, but also that the tools that we've used or developed here, improved, can be accessible to others. So in that spirit, we are most certainly excited about the prospect of, contributing vocabulary. And it's also quite useful because we have I mean, all these entries were also translated into Chinese, so there's already this ultimate multilingual element to it, and I think it would be really helpful, and I'm glad we will all be very glad if it can make other people's work easier.
It will be also interesting because you have maybe knowledge of other existing thesauri that could be added or at least partly used. So this is good idea. Secondly, I don't know if I didn't see any other questions specifically regarding to the semantic background, but I must say that for us it was really good to have this kind of I call it guidelines, but it's way too little as an explication. But this semantic background at least helped us not only for the China-related cultural heritage, but also because we come from a long history, but maybe also to use a more semantically based approach to all the other information that we cater for. So thank you very much for presenting this and explaining in a more comprehensive way the flow of ideas and people and objects, which is a very useful system of describing things.
Yeah, if I may just briefly comment, we were a little bit, it was very difficult. The providers wanted us, you tell us is this it or is it not? We wanted to have something general, and it was a very great learning experience, and all the particular questions actually helped us refine our definition, even if it was in broadest terms. And I must say that I believe that this concept of flows proved to be particularly useful then also for the editorial work, because I somehow feel that Sofie, who was in charge of that part, really did put it into practice. We were quite pleased with the results. So yeah, thank you.
Do you want to add something about this, Sofie? In what way that you could work with these things in the work that you did?
Yes, I want to come back to that in our later presentation.
Sound is low.
Sorry, is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to come back to this in later presentations on editorial and exhibition and book and all that. But it is true. I must say, now that I look back on it, Maja, and I hear you retrospect, I'm going to do so a little bit myself. For me, it was also the partner's response to your work in the semantic framework. So the fact that what resonated really within the consortium was this talk about the flows. I think it really hit, I don't know, it hit a high note because of its many dimensions. It had a spiritual dimension, something very concrete you could see in your head, these objects traveling around from one continent to another. You could imagine these explorers, these collectors as people who are actually at the roots of what we see as Chinese heritage. So I could really feel the reverberance of that concept, and I thought I would be a very bad curator if I now say, oh, but I'm going to do something completely different. So yes, I felt the vibe, I took it on, and we ran with it also in the editorials. And I think because of that, the outcomes of this project are really reinforcing one another, and they form a really complementary fabric of sorts of project results, from everything tool-based, data-wise, metadata-wise, editorially, conceptually. It clicked very well together, and as we often have said, it started indeed with this semantic task.
Thank you, Sophie. And I urge the people that have the possibility to come and stay for this conference, because as Sophie mentioned, there will be more explanations about this in the way that either the book was created tomorrow, and the tutorials and the other lots of, I call them text, but it's so much more text and images that she and others created that are visible. She will explain this in very detail and very well, but you can see how all this is connected. I think since we are there with Sophie, and I have a question for her, is more a general question, because in this project, I also learned with the crowd, or we were happy or lucky with the crowdsourcing campaign, of course, that through Sophie's connection with University of Leuven and some other contacts we have, that we have these students who are very cooperative in doing all this work. But I have a more complicated question in, if we have this kind of crowdsourcing campaigns, how do you create, apart from this lucky thing that we have, how do you create such a crowd, and how do you sustain such a crowd? Have you any ideas how, what things we could do to have successful crowdsourcing campaigns?
We have different experiences now already with Spyros and Vassilis and the team that developed crowd heritage. We have different experiences in different projects and different themes. And you are right, Erik, in a sense that the topic of Chinese heritage really is something that appeals to a specific group of cultural heritage enthusiasts extremely strongly. So it's definitely not a theme that leaves people untouched, or that is for people something far away, very abstract, tentatively entered. No, the people that took part in the campaign really were passionate about Chinese culture and Chinese heritage. And this is, of course, what you need in any type of project to gain great results. So in that respect, it was a really good move to involve from early on our student group. So we have, via my affiliation with KU Leuven and the Ljubljana Sinology team, we had 2 universities involved from the very start. And I think we were wise to get this young, fresh, ambitious blood of our students in the loop, and to really challenge them, because this is what we did. We presented them with a task: make your own campaign, make sure that you hit these goals. We don't even care how you do it, but do it your way. We really want them to use their social media channels, their networks of colleagues and of friends and of peers, their creative ideas to organize a digital event where people come together and have an annotation sprint. So yes, I think they were a big part of our success. They gave us a lot. But also, I think we gave them a unique opportunity to step into this network of partners, to get to know these platforms, these tools, these mechanisms of user interaction with digital heritage. So I think it was really beneficial to everyone and everything involved. Could you replicate that in any context? I would say so, to a certain extent, as long as you're in touch with with specific communities, right? So in our case, student communities this time, but I could imagine that if one of the partners has a participatory program or a group of volunteers or friends of the archive, you know, to me, these are ideal communities to set up crowdsourcing actions with.
So I understand well that it's to have a kind of a successful crowdsourcing campaign, that it's not just going out and try to do something with this completely unidentifiable crowd that's out there, but maybe already as a start, try to for yourself have
a nucleus of people that is a good anchor point, and then those people will bring other people, and they again will bring other people, and so you build the circle. It is possible to do it without having this predefined community in mind, but it's hard work, and you need a dedicated person or even multiple persons to really deploy this as a query, because you are basically looking for a man like Diogenes once was, but in the digital world this can be even much harder than in the real world. So I would not underestimate it, and personally I would always start with a community, a dedicated community to begin with.
Okay, thank you. I see that that Antonella raised her hand, so I don't know if she can unmute herself or that somebody else. Okay. Dunya, can you unmute Antonella? Okay.
Thank you, Dunya. Yes, I had just a small comment about the sustainability of the communities around the crowdsourcing. We have experienced that there is a willingness of the people involved to be rewarded in some way for the work that they are doing. And the rewarding is not necessarily payment, it's not necessarily financial. It could be in terms of well-being, because it is an opportunity to meet with other people and to share your knowledge, your expertise, your interest with other people. It could be rewarding in terms of points, the mechanisms of assigned points to the people participating in the crowdsourcing has demonstrated to be encouraging people to do even more. And I think that there is another way to reward people who participate, that is to create a community that continues, that is also recorded in the content itself. So in this sense, new research projects are under development, where the metadata that are assigned to describe an object do not describe only the object per se isolated as a unique object, but it describes also how the object is used, by whom, who did contribute to the description of this object. And in this way, if we are able, through the metadata, to take traces of what has happened with this digital object, the idea of this community of contributors can grow, and that would be a strong encouragement for participation.
Yes, I want to add one thing to that. Antonella is completely right. In a sense, the community is its own reward, right? By competing in these challenges and by contributing, you are among like-minded people, even if they are 2,000 miles away from you. So becoming a part of this, knowing that this platform is there, knowing that this is something you can do to take care of our collective heritage. This really is a reward in and of itself, and I think we've had the best proof of that in the context of PAGODE in the persons of the students that worked with us on the summer sprint, because what started as a very casual collaboration, if you can even call it that, with on the KU Leuven part, some students working on their policy project that they are obliged to carry out throughout the academic year. At the Ljubljana part, as a part of the courses of the Sinology department, it started in a very, a very academic way, with this academic distance perhaps between all the people involved. And then the distance became smaller and smaller throughout this crowdsourcing campaign, where we then saw that a few of the students were extremely active, extremely involved. And this is why we came up with the idea of the Annotation Sprint, which was with a small group of people, but you could see that they went above and beyond for the sake of the project, not because we asked them specifically or because a big bonus was hanging in the air for them. No, they wanted to do that for the benefits of the project. And then finally, these students stayed in our loop. They came to one of our digital events. They contributed quotes about their experiences to the PAGODE book, and I can see that today here they are as well attending our final conference. So this is community and capacity building in the best possible scenario.
Yeah, thank you, Sofie. Indeed, this is a very important. I'm not going to say lesson, but this sounds very, very, although we are in an academic context, but I think it's important for all of us to learn that there are very easy ways to come together in the times that we live now, from, as Sofie said, far away from each other, and doing together things that we maybe a couple of years ago never thought that we'll be able to do together. And this time it was for the benefit of the project, but there are so many other benefits, as also Antonella mentioned, for well-being and all these things like that. So it's a very important lesson, I think. So now finally, I think we go to the last presentation, where there's also a question from my colleague, Eva Krauthuizer, she was wondering, during this automatic enrichment, so you have the automatic text strings enrichments, for instance, and then you have the manual validation, phase 1 manual validation. She was wondering how much of correctness do we arrive there? Because I know it was not the end, but how far did we get already if you do first this automatic text string and the first manual validation? Vassilis, I suppose it's you who...
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yes, you. Okay, yes, I will answer this question. So, actually it depends on the data set. There were some data sets that we had a very high success rate, and there's some others that we didn't have as high. But on average, it was between 85 to 90%, the success of the automatic tools.
Could you explain why what difference when you say there are some data sets where
yes, there were some data sets, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, depending on the descriptions that we had inside. Like when Mina showed the data sets, you could see that we had data sets from various sources. So we had data sets from Rijksmuseum, we had data sets from European Fashion Association, we had data sets from other museums. So we didn't have a uniform, we didn't have data sets only from one provider. So we had so for some data sets that, for example, from the Rijksmuseum, the success was around 80%. For the fashion that we used, the thesaurus, we had success over 90%. So that's why I'm saying that the average for these data sets was around 85 to 90%. The success of the automatic algorithms. That's what I mean.
It's indeed high. It's very good. And then there's another question, and it's not explicitly for you, Vassilis, and it's not explicitly for the second speakers. I think it's a question also for Europeana, but partly for you. As I put on my hat as a content provider to Europeana, or through this PAGODE approach to Europeana, and I see these wonderful things happening with crowdsourcing enrichment and automatic enrichment, and all these things will then The next step is that they will go to Ljubljana. And as Valentina also said, this in theory, this is done. So we will see how Ljubljana will present this or already presented this. My question is also, how can all this enrichment come back to the content providers? Because in a way, Ljubljana, although wonderful it is, and it is a really thing that is used by us and necessary for us, but on the other hand, all these museums and institutions like ours, we always still have our own systems that we present to the public and that could benefit from all this enrichment that is created through this project. So how do we could envision a kind of return, and in what way these returns could come to our own database systems? Maybe people from Ljubljana want to pop in, or if Vassilis can also say that the way that you deliver them to Ljubljana is it's also a way that you can deliver it to the content providers back or something like that.
Yes, I can give a short question. I don't know if somebody from Ljubljana wants. I'm not talking on behalf of Ljubljana anyway. I can only say that yes, Ljubljana has an API to give content, but also an API to get content back. So there's always a way to use Ljubljana's API to extract the enrichments. I'm not sure whether you can only extract the enrichments or the entire data sets. I think it works on a data set level. So you can use the Ljubljana's API to get the data sets that also includes the enrichments. I think that's a quick question, a quick answer to this question. But I'm not answering on behalf of Ljubljana. That's how I would do it. Of course, you need knowledge how to use the API, so you need technical knowledge. So I suppose that the content providers would like to have a way that it's easier to get back those enrichments, and I think that's for Ljubljana to answer.
Okay, thank you. I see that Jolan and raised his hand. That was also why I posed this question. So if it's possible to give the floor to Jolan.
Yes, I think I'm unmuted. I think you can hear me, so thanks. Oh, yeah. I think what Vassilis said is already a good first point. We do have APIs that allow us to get the data that is in Ljubljana back to whoever wants to extract it. This is of course something that is kind of new to Ljubljana. Normally we get data in from the content providers and everything we have is the same or very similar to what is in the collection or the CMSs of the content providers and the institutions themselves. So for the past year, for the first time, we suddenly have a lot of content that content providers would like to get back. For this reason, we're working on our annotations API, which is a specific API that looks at all of the enrichments, all of the annotations that have been added on top of the source data of a content provider. Partly because on the one hand, we would still want to keep a clear distinction between this is source data created by a curator in an institution who has, the knowledge feedback, all of these things. And we want to keep that separated to the user as well from this is content that was enriched by someone else that maybe was validated, but it is not part of the source data. The upside of this, or one of the big benefits of this, is that for content providers as well, this gives an opportunity to only take that part that has been enriched back into their collection. So they don't have to download the full record that they basically already have, or the full data set they already have. With the annotations API, the goal is to allow you to only extract the data that you don't have yet and you would like to add to your records currently. So there's not a lot more I can say about that since it's still in active development, but projects like the PAGODE project, like the XX project, and some more projects that are coming in the future, Weave and Crafted, are all going to add to this this new enrichment strategy, basically. So okay. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it's very great. Thank you very much, Jolan. And indeed, since we in our institutions, we are working with Ljubljana almost from the beginning or even before, there was always something that was lacking, and it was not lacking because we didn't want to do or you didn't want to, but it's lacking because we were not there yet in doing this. And for me, all these things also with when you talk about linked open data and all these things, like it's a kind of a circular world. So we need to have this thing flowing all the time around, so that there are for people so many different access points from where they then would get to all the other different possibilities of getting information. So this is a nice thing to hear from you. I was wondering, are there any more questions from people here in the room? Because if not, I think it was already a very interesting, a bit demanding sometimes morning. We had very, very different things to hear, very interesting things to hear. And I really urge everybody to come back